Hey YouTube, Do-It-Yourself Junkie 369 here, and in this video I'm going to be building a couple of EAA workbenches to use on the RV10 project. And basically I have a link down in the description that has materials you'll need, step-by-step instructions, but for some people it's just easier to see somebody else do it to get an idea of what needs to be done. Excuse my voice, I've been sick lately. So basically for this project you're going to need about 50 screws, 50 3-inch, 50 2.5-inch, and 50 1.5-inch length screws. About 16 ounces of wood glue, just regular Elmer's glue would be okay. I went with a water resistant type. And then you'll need 14 2x4s, 8 feet long, and 2 pieces of plywood. One sheet of plywood needs to be 1/2 inch thick, and then the other sheet of plywood needs to be 3/4 inch thick. And these 2 pieces of plywood and the 2x4s are going to make 2 workbenches for you that are about 33 inches tall and 5 feet by 2 feet. These materials should cost you around $100 to $150 for these 2 tables, which is pretty good. Depending on your sweat equity, it should be 1 hour to 2 hours depending on how slow you work. You might be able to go out and buy something, but it likely won't be as good. I have a workbench over here that I bought from Harbor Freight for about $100 just for one. My instructions are going to differ from those in the link just slightly. I'm not putting the piece of wood trim around the edges of the table to make it look nice, so I don't have the like 1/4 inch pine trim and the finishing nails. As far as tools, you can get away with just a handsaw, a tape measure, and a pencil, and then something to drive the screws. I'm going to be using a DeWalt cordless saw, probably my DeWalt chop saw, because I have that stuff on hand. If I had to, I could make it with just the handsaw. And really, you don't. I'm going to use some sawhorses, and really you don't even need those. You can get the plywood cut at Lowe's or Home Depot for you. They'll charge like 25-30 cents a cut. So you get those pieces pre-cut. And then when you get home, you can just prop your 2x4 across the chair or something and use your handsaw to cut it to length. So really minimal tools are needed if you don't own woodworking tools already. So let's get started, and since I consider this part of the building the airplane, I'm going to track the time and put it in my worksheet where I'm tracking how long it takes for each step, and basically how long it takes total project to finish this RV10. I'm hoping to have it done in 2 years, as I say in the intro video. We'll see if we get there. So first step, if you didn't have the store do this for you, you've got to basically chop the 3/4 inch thick plywood from 8 feet down to 5 feet in length. And that's going to form the 2 tabletops. And once you have that done, you're going to slice it in half. And on this, you're looking for 2 24-inch pieces, but because of the saw kerf that you're cutting through the plywood, you'll end up just shy of that on each piece. And then when you're cutting your 2x4s from there, you'll kind of adjust for that dimension. So first step is, like I said, to cut the 3/4 inch plywood. Which on this, it's good to have a helper that is strong enough to help you pick up the sheet of plywood. I'm just using a piece of aluminum that I have on hand as a straight edge. Piece of wood would work also. Another piece of plywood would work. Anything that you know is straight. You really don't want to use a 2x4. it might have a slight curve to it, and you don't want that. And then with your saw, if you are using some sort of saw, the finer teeth or the higher number of teeth you have, the better. It'll make a smoother cut, less splinters. And that's especially important if you don't trim out the edge like I am. The other thing that helps with splinters is you want to set the saw's depth just barely cutting through the wood. And that helps a lot with splintering too. And I'll have links for a handsaw down there, a tape measure and stuff, that if you need to buy those. I'll also put in links for any DeWalt tools I use. And on mine, they're the 18 volt, but a few years ago I bought an adapter to use the new lithium batteries. And those make a world of difference. The batteries last longer, and when they die they just completely stop instead of winding down, which I always hated, the winding down part. And then don't forget, your saw blade's going to create a curve which has some width to it, so cut on the outside of your line. And next step is to cut these exactly in half. Don't forget, again, saw kerf is going to remove some of the width. So on this I would draw a line exactly at 24 inches and just try to cut down with the kerf right in the center of that line to minimize how much material you're losing from each table and to keep them equal. Because our saw blade is barely cutting through, I can just run it across the top of the saw horses and I'm not really causing any damage to them. So that's another benefit to setting the saw up this way. So these tables are just going to be just under 34 inches tall, which is down here. And it's not even above my waist, which seems kind of short to work on. It's not very good ergonomically. For me, an ideal table would be about 44 inches, but that would use extra wood. And then I'm also worried, as I build up the airplane on top of the bench, it'll eventually get to a height where I have to stand on a step ladder to reach something to assemble it, rather than it being at a convenient height. So to start out, I'll probably be sitting on a stool to get me down to the correct height for the table. But as the plane gets bigger, it should raise up to the correct height. The other thing I could do is put blocks under the legs to raise the table up higher and then pull them out later. But again, 2x4s were kind of more expensive than I remember. They were about $4 instead of $2. So making them shorter uses a little bit less wood. And the next step on that is to cut the legs and the long pieces that are the frame for the tabletop. And basically one piece will get cut to 60 inches, which is 5 feet. Now leave a 33-inch piece left over that you can cut for the table leg height. I'm just Going to use the DeWalt chop saw here for these since they're nice 90-degree cuts. That'll be really accurate. And has a really fine blade for doing trim, so it'll be really smooth cuts. If I didn't have that, you can get a speed square. So something similar to this, framing square, speed square, whatever you want to call it. And what you would do is lay that down on your 2x4, stick your saw up against it, line it up with your mark, and then just slice along the square, and that'll keep your saw square to the cut. I learned that the other day. Pretty useful tool. But since I have the chop saw, I'm going to use that. Now that you have those cut, you can grab one of your tabletops and stick it good surface down. Whatever side is better, and that's what you want your work surface to be. That's the side you place down. So this side has some unfilled knots in it. And that's going to be the underside of my table, so I have it facing up. And then these are pieces of your frame. You have 4 of them, 2 for each table. Then the 33-inch pieces, or they're a little bit under 33, are your legs, and you'll need 4 more of those in a second. So we lost about a 1/16 of an inch off of 24 inches. And then your 2x4's actual dimension is 1.5 inches. So since you got 2 of those, that's 3 inches. 24 minus 3 is 21, minus a 1/16. So 20 and 15/16 is how long we need our cross braces between these. And there'll be 5 of them per table. So to make those, you'll need 3 2x4s. You'll cut 4 out of 2 of the 2x4s and then 2 off of 1 of the 2x4s. If you've got anything that has a live edge on it or some damage, this is a great place to use those since they'll be inside the table where you won't be able to see them. And basically when I picked these, it was impossible to find completely clear ones that were straight. And I'd go for straight over good looking any day of the week. Those were 2x4s, 1 and 2 there, that got 4 pieces cut out of them, and you should have a little over 8.5 inches left for part of the leg. We only need 5 of them right now, so we'll set these other pieces down here on the floor out of the way. Hopefully I don't trip over them. And at this
this point you can start assembling your frame. So you'll need your glue, and I need to go check out what size screw. I'm guessing the 3-inch screws for this. Okay, so for this next part, when you're actually starting to put stuff together, I found that a drill with a bit driver on it, very useful. Square helps too, but you can get away without it. And then some clamps is also useful for putting the pieces together. And this is where you'll need the 3-inch screws and the glue, wood glue. And if you're not using a square, what you can do is you can set up all the pieces and then measure the diagonals, and as long as the diagonals match, it should be square. Basically, at this part you want it as square as you can get it. The closer to square you can get it, the better your table's going to be. Basically, what's nice about having all this clamped down is when you put the screws in here, it's not going to push the joint apart, which can happen if you're just trying to hold it by hand. But like I said, you can get away without those clamps. You just have to hold it real tight while you're putting the screws in, and at that point it's useful to have a second pair of hands. So the best way is to go 30 inches in. You want 1 2x4 centered there. And then half of 30 is 15 inches. So you want 1 2x4 centered there. And then 30 plus 15 is 45. So 1 2x4 centered there. And that'll place these evenly. And since I know it was square when I initially screwed it together, you can go in and just place those marks on both sides, and they'll be square across here when you line up the marks. I'm just putting 2 screws per end because you really don't want to split this, and the real strength will come when you screw the tabletop to the frame, just like putting the skin on the frame of the aircraft. Now that the frame's together, what you'll want to do is attach the tabletop to it. since the plywood is really hard and the screws probably won't countersink down into it without splintering the plywood, I have a countersink drill bit, that I'm going to go and put a hole everywhere that I plan on putting a screw. So the glue might seem unnecessary, but with this type of construction, it provides a laminated joint. Once dry, it can't flex without breaking the glue bond. So it provides a stiffer table than if you just had fasteners. Those fasteners kind of act like pivot points and stuff could move around without the glue holding it together. So if you skip on the glue, you'll end up with a weaker table. And this next step, you just lay the tabletop on there. And this is another point where you want to make sure that you go through and get this thing on there really square and flush. So that you end up with a nice table. And if you built your frame square, it should be fairly easy. If your frame isn't square, it's going to be kind of hard to make everything flush on here. Which, I'm all good. And then this is where you want to use the 1.5" screws. Here I kind of put 3 along each frame piece that's running across the table, and then lengthwise I just split up between every cross piece. So I didn't really have a set measurement or anything. As you saw, I just kind of eyeballed it all. Thing I'm concerned with is making sure all the screw heads are either flush or just below the surface. That's the way there's not anything really sticking up to catch on any of the work pieces or to make anything unlevel. These 33" pieces come in, and you want to stick them in the corner like that, screw them in. I would put maybe 2.5" screws or 3" screws this way. No, 2.5 would be better. 2.5" screws this way, and maybe 1 3" screw this way. And when you get this thing in there, make sure it's perpendicular in both directions. You don't want it canted off to one side. Not only is your table going to end up looking funny because it's canted, when you lay it down on the ground, feet down, it's going to rock because you'll have one leg that's shorter or longer depending on how it's tilted. This is another spot where 2 screws is probably good. Mainly it's just to hold the legs in place while you get it flipped over and you put the tray in the bottom and the tray or in the frame for the tray, and that's what's going to make it really strong. There's some wobble in there, but when I get that cross bracing lower down for the tray on the bottom, all that will go away. Okay, so next step is we need to cut a 17.5 inch piece that will lay here and go up here, and that will form the first part of the leg from the tabletop down to the cross brace for the shelf. And that piece we set aside that we cut the two 20-inch pieces out of, or the 20-inch and 15/16, that piece is going to make 3 17.5 inch pieces. And then for the other 5 that we need, we'll get them out of a full length 2x4. So that's the next step. I was supposed to get 3 out of that piece, but this one is a bit short, and I think what it is I bought 90 or whatever 2x4 I bought was like a house stud rather than a full 8-foot long 2x4. So I might have to run to the store and get a 2x4 to make up for some of the lost material. But maybe I'll be able to use that piece somewhere else. We'll see. Another thing is when I cut these, I'm cutting to the outside of the line, which means I'm losing a little bit of material to the width of the saw blade every time I cut a new piece. And out of that one I was like barely an inch short. So these will get glued here. And I would just use a couple, maybe 3 or 4 2.5 inch screws to screw those on there. That's one great thing about these lithiums is even if I've forgotten to put one on the charger, they only take about 30 minutes to charge versus something closer to like 2 to 4 hours for the NiCad ones. And then usually when I put the NiCad ones on there, they're hot and they have to go through a cool down period before they start charging. These usually aren't unless I'm using them on something like an angle grinder. So if you haven't switched your 18-volt NiCads over to lithium, there's a link for this adapter and battery kit down there. This is a must-have. So the next step is to cut the piece that goes across here. It's about 57 inches. I'll figure out exactly what it is in a minute. But you'll need 2 for each table. that's 4, which means the leftover from those will be the 33-inch pieces that you need for your table legs on the other table. So that's what we're cutting next. It should be 57 because 60 minus 3, inch and a half for each 2x4 at the end, is 57. So that is the length, and that's what we'll cut next. And on that you'll need 4 fresh full-length 2x4s for those cuts. So we'll set this one aside. This is one that's going to get a few more of these 17.5-inch pieces cut out of it, but we'll come back to that later. Since I'm running out of 2x4s, it means I'm almost done cutting all the material. I just have to build the other table. And we're about an hour and 40 minutes in. I'm not sure if my my elves there, sped up the process or slowed it down. But they'd die if I didn't let them help with this project. They've been waiting for it forever. So this is where the strength and rigidity of these legs comes in, is adding this piece. And then there's a cross piece, and then that 1/2-inch plywood gets cut to fit in here and form a shelf, which ties all this together, making it, between that and the glue and the joints, making it a really stiff structure that can hold a lot of weight. I forget what they estimate these could hold, but I'm guessing well over 500 pounds. And again, 2.5-inch screws. I'm going to put 2 at either end. And this is where you want to make sure this ends up flush, because it's going to hold your legs perfectly perpendicular this way. And then this way will be the cross brace piece. And then we need a cross brace piece in here, and because these are in line with these, it's this length, so the 20 inches 15/16, and it just needs 1 at each end, so 4 total between the 2 tables. Because it doesn't need any in the middle really, because this bottom shelf is mainly just for storage of tools, materials, stuff that you've working on that you set aside to work on something else just to get it out of the way. So it's not supporting as much weight as the tabletop. That will be 2 screws into here, and you can also go on the inside here and drill into this piece. So probably 2 screws there. Or maybe 1 screw there to keep it from splitting. And I would run with maybe the 3.5-inch going in this way, and then well, you could do 3.5-inch that way too. It's thick enough to support that. Or 3-inch or whatever. I think it's 3-inch. I keep forgetting the size that I'm supposed to be using. I've been using 2.5-inch throughout because that's what I had on hand. The next biggest that I had was like 4-inch, which I think is overkill for most of this project. Another great spot. Make sure everything is as square as you can get it. That way you don't end up with a crooked table. Well, that has been 2 hours. I need to put some lights in here so you can see me better. All my lighting's back here. And basically all I have left to do is add the 1 inch or ½ inch shelf. And there's those 8½ inch pieces that you cut earlier that don't need to be 8½. On the website, the cutout list, they have a star next to them because you're supposed to cut them to match whatever this is. So those need to be cut and screwed on here tomorrow. And then that's 1 table down in just under 2.5 hours probably by the time I get that stuff done. And we'll have to do the next one. So we're looking at about 5 hours to build 2 tables, at least if you're working by yourself. If you had somebody else that knew what they were doing, knew the cut list and the plans and how it was going together, you probably could whip both of them out in about 2 hours flat, I'm guessing. So before you flip the table over, you take your 8½ inch pieces and you're going to put them here, and they'll need to be trimmed to match the length of your table legs. I can't give you an exact dimension because depending on how you cut your 2x4s, you might end up with a different measurement than I have. Especially since I wasn't using 8-foot long 2x4s. So this leg isn't exactly 33 inches. If you built it square, each one should be the same. I'm going to measure all 4 just in case. So now I've got to take these short pieces and cut them to match this. Okay, now that I tracked down my pieces, we'll have to cut one out of this, it looks like. So now that I've tracked those down and I separated out what was table legs and cross bracing, I can go ahead and slice these pieces up. Get them glued on here, and get this off the sawhorses, flip it over, and put the shelf on there.
Now that these are cut down the length, they simply go here and get screwed down. I'll probably be using 2.5 inch screws and maybe 2 or 3 of them. Probably 3. Okay, so now that the second part of the leg is attached here, it's time to get it off the sawhorses, flip it over, and then we'll have to cut out that 1/2 inch sheet of plywood to fit in here. Lengthwise, it's going to be, you're going to cut it to 50 inches. Yep, 50 inches. And then cut it directly in half like you did the other one, because it's going to be the same dimensions across as the top piece. We're about to find out how heavy this table is. Hopefully I don't hurt myself. Hold on. Had to go to sleep, so I'm stuck doing this part myself. Oh, this isn't too bad. I could get a scale out here and weigh this, but I'm guessing this table probably weighs about 50 pounds. Maybe a little bit less. So most of you are probably going to want 2 people to move these around to reorg your shop, and it's not too bad of a height. It's a little bit taller than my Harbor Freight workbench, and about the same dimensions. It looks like it's maybe a foot shorter. So depending on how much you value your time, I guess you could get 2 Harbor Freight workbenches for about $100 a piece and glue those together when you assemble them. And I don't know if they'll definitely probably hold enough weight on the tabletop. There's a question of how much weight the shelf will be able to hold, because it's quite a bit thinner material on that bench. But I'll quit stalling here and get the other piece of plywood cut up here and cut. This part is kind of horrible because it cuts at 50 inches. So So this sheet of plywood is almost getting cut exactly in half, and I probably should have had the store cut this one, because I really, right now, everybody's getting ready for bed, and I don't have anybody to help hold that end while I'm cutting across this, which makes it nearly impossible to do by yourself without binding up the saw and causing some sort of damage, possibly to me. And I would just stick the workbench under the free end, except for it's not really the right height to match up with my sawhorses, unfortunately. So whenever you cut something in different thickness, don't forget to reset your blade and either unplug your saw or take the battery out of it, depending on what type it is. And then big thing other than that is don't feel under the wood to make sure it's cutting through. I have heard of somebody doing that. And just like the top layer, now we want to draw a line at 24 inches and cut right on it and cut this thing in half and get it in the table, and then that'll be one table complete. And it only took 3 hours for that first one. Luckily, going into the second one, a lot of the pieces are already cut when you cut out the pieces for the first one. So that works out really great. I mean, basically your 2 plywood pieces are already cut because of making the first one. Your side pieces, your legs are all cut. Most of the cross bracing is cut. There's 3, so I need to make 4 more of those. You don't need the sawhorses to do all this, especially if you want to get the panels cut at whatever store you buy them. But I like these sawhorses, so I think I'm going to see if I can't find a link for them and put them down in the description of the video in case you want to pick up a set. They're real light. They weigh, man, they barely feel like they weigh a pound. I can't remember how much I can hold, but it's quite a bit. And they have slots for hanging stuff, putting pieces of wood in there to create like a platform you can stand on. They have little holes in here where you can fold them up and hang them up. And then because they're plastic all the way through, I don't worry about just slicing through them with the saw. They have rubber pads in here to keep the wood from sliding around. And they were cheap enough that if I ever cut them up bad enough, I'll just get new ones. And right now I've 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Been using these for a while, and this one has 10 cuts through the top, and it's not even close to needing replacement. So just like the tabletop or the bench top, you want it to countersink these and use the 1.5 inches. So I'm going to do that now. Countersink it over there, not on your workbench. That way you don't countersink into your workbench
and put some fresh holes in it before you're using it on your airplane. And I know these are EAA workbenches, and they're originally designed for working on experimental aircraft, putting those together. But really, if you're watching this video looking at how to build a workbench, this would make a pretty good, just run-of-the-mill workbench. And you could adjust the design to have it longer, taller, whatever you need. It's just that all the measurements I'm giving you and the material list won't work if you go that route. And my advice for putting this down on the glue you just laid down is to hold it at an angle, put the one edge all the way up against the table legs, line out the outside edge, and then drop it down. And then that should get you really, really close. You might just need to tap it with a hammer to get it perfectly aligned. Okay. Mine wants to be a pain, and as I tap one end, the other end's moving too, and I need it to rotate just a little bit, so I'll be sticking a screw in one corner and then tapping it into its final location. And there you have it, one table. For the next half of the video, I'm going to fast forward through this, so I'll show it all, but there's really not much or anything at this point for me to talk about, because construction will be completely identical. You'll just be cutting up these last two 2x4s to get your short pieces of leg here. And your other framing pieces, your cross braces. So one of those is going to get cut into 4 of these, and then you have a short piece of your leg. And then the other one is going to be the 4 short pieces of your leg, whatever dimension, 17.5 inches. And then the remainder of your short pieces of leg will come out of that. Or remember, you only need 33 inches for your legs. So as you cut your legs down to length, you'll have extra here that you can use on one of these pieces as needed. So really not hard to do or figure out from this point on. Just make sure you don't mix up your pieces. You need 2 60-inch pieces and 2 57-inch pieces. That's what it was. And then from there, everything else either is already cut, or you can figure out how to cut it on your own. And because you have a workbench, you can build your next one on top of this. Just make sure when you're countersinking, you don't countersink into your existing workbench top, because then you'll drill holes in it, and might as well keep it as nice as you can for as long as you can.
Just real quick, these are the leg pieces that were left over from cutting the 57-inch length for this cross brace down here. Well, they're going to be longer than 33 inches. And this leg right here was kind of a leftover piece. So it's like 32.5 inches. Well, you want your tables to be exactly the same height. So don't be tempted to make this one taller because you have extra material here on the leg piece that you cut earlier. Cut that extra material off and make them exactly the same height. So if you're using 8-foot 2x4s, it'd be close to 33 inches. Because I was using studs, which are a couple inches shorter, I ended up with leg pieces that are 32.5 inches. So I'll go ahead and cut these to length.
So that's 2 tables complete in 4.7 hours. For storage, you can stack them one on top of the other like I have them now. If you're doing like elevators, vertical or horizontal stabilizer, anything long, wings, when you first start them, you can stack them or set them in the end like this. And when you're working on maybe like the start of the fuselage or something else, or you have more than one person working on 2 different components, you can stick them side by side like this. And I've also seen one set up L-shaped, although I'm not quite sure what you would be doing that would require that. I guess it would give you a lot of counter space that you could access without really moving, just turning. So that's it. Hope you liked the video. Hit the like, subscribe button. This probably wouldn't necessarily kick you into building your own RV, but just by chance, if you're looking at ordering one of those and you like this video enough that you're like, okay, the building of the table, I'm not really a woodworking guy, so it's not that hard. I guess maybe if this scares you a little, you should take a step back and think for a minute about building an airplane, because it's probably the simplest thing just about. I'm just not very into woodworking. Either way, I'll put my builder number down in the description. I'd love it if you use that whenever you order a kit, because Vans will send me $100 and I'm going to need it to pay for this airplane. And it doesn't come out of your pocket, it's a finder's fee that they are generous enough to give out when people help you make your decision to buy one of their kits. And that works for any Vans aircraft, as long as you're a first-time builder. One of the links down there will be for an Excel spreadsheet where I'm tracking my time, rivet count, and everything like that. And you can download it and use it for your own, tracking your own build. It wasn't very hard to set up, but I do have a pie chart that tracks whether I'm doing prep time, which these tables are considered prep time, buying tools is prep, admin, which is like ordering the kit, talking to the shipping company, stuff like that, and then actual build time. Admin would also be unpacking and organizing everything and making sure it's not damaged, and then actual build time will be when I'm putting stuff together, reading the instructions, stuff like that, actually actively building. I just felt like I should cut it out that way and see how it breaks down, because a lot of people are saying like, oh yeah, it only takes 2,000 hours, but you'll spend like double that going to Vans Air Force and asking questions. So we'll see how that all splits out. And you can download that and use it for your own aircraft if you'd like. It's not very hard to understand. The formulas are pretty easy and they're already in there, so it just should be cut and paste as your build progresses. That's all I've got. So see you in the next video when I'll cover some of the tools I bought and why. And then after that it'll be unpacking the empennage kit, which is what I got first, and starting the build. Hope to see you in those videos. Have a good night. Hope you enjoyed the video.